listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, people who play it. Today is August 23rd, 2022, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing this morning?
Spencer, hello. This is odd because we are actually recording after reset and server maintenance for the first time
in like 3 weeks.
Time, it feels like, yeah. So that's nice. It's been an interesting week because, man, we've had, for the last, I don't know, a month and a half longer, it's just been nonstop, like huge news and discussion topics. I feel like this week has leveled off a bit. We got no official Dragonflight previews, we just no huge news items this week with that kind of stuff. And, obviously we had the auction house patch and that broke some stuff and it continues to be broken. But it's a work in progress, kind of like we expected it to be. But other than that, it's kind of just, season 4 continues apace and we're looking ahead to the stuff that we know is coming. But it's we're taking a bit of a breather this week when it comes to all that stuff, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't mind it that much because there is stuff we want to catch up on and talk a little bit more about this week. So that's great. But yeah, you're right. The PSA that we have to put out right away is about Auction House. If you're someone who's been using the mobile app, as a warning at the moment, the prices that you're seeing on the mobile app might not be the prices that are in game. You might think you're buying something for 10 or 15 gold, and it might actually be 2,000 or 3,000 gold. That is currently a bug that is happening. So buyer beware if you're choosing to use the mobile app at the moment. That is a pretty critically bad error that's happening. And I don't think there's going to be any kind of tech support that'll be able to somehow get you back gold if you do a purchase incorrectly like that, especially since it's cross-platform with one being on mobile and one being live service. So yeah, it's that's a sticky one. Just avoid if you can.
Yeah, I gotta say, like the auction house has been varying degrees of busted since servers came up last Tuesday, and we kind of expected it to be, right? I mean, it's a huge change to that system of the game, and we saw auction house go up and down throughout the course of the week. We saw extra extended maintenance periods and stuff, and there's still issues with certain items not working right, or the display issue that you mentioned. That said, it's still an upgrade from where I was the week before. Like on my dead little server with no functioning auction house, like one that's only works sometimes and is kind of broken in some pretty severe ways, it was still better for me than it was, when we just had the server-specific auction house. So,
right.
Obviously a work in progress, but you can see kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be so much better once all the kinks are kind of worked out and everything is working the way we expect it to.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I'm hoping they get resolved. And at least this past week, they did a lot of work into it, like you said, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks that all gets settled. The important thing to me is that it's all settled before Dragonflight, because that's when all the new stuff hits. Tons of people come back. Lots of people are using the auction house on a daily basis and in a very large way. That is where things need to be really, really, really solid and working as intended when it comes to these systems. So. I don't mind them having some kinks they need to work out of the hose right now, as long as they get them all resolved before we hit the really, 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 really busy stuff. This is the experimental season.
Yeah, this is why they do this stuff, in the summer, in the lead up to an expansion coming out, and it's not a 10.0 feature.
Exactly.
Enough stuff is going to break when pre-patch comes out, and there's going to be enough stuff to address once expansion is out. So, try to get this one out of the way if possible.
Exactly. The other thing that we had last week was Legion Time Walking that was going on, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I've been one who farms a lot of Legion Time Walking to get particular trinkets or particular items that you just can't get. I remember at one point I farmed the Lava Drop Pendant because it had Haste Mastery on it, and there was no current neck in Shadowlands that dropped that had Haste and Mastery on it. And that was one of those like, oh, well, this is a really sought after piece. It's something I want to put a lot of time into farming. And there's also trinkets that are very large, the Amalgam Spine being a really big one. And then there's a Prism. There's a something Prism that's another caster trinket that's really sought after as well. And so what I wanted to talk about, I guess, was I dislike that best in slot or top 3 trinkets come for an event we only see once every 4 months. I dislike that is a thing.
Yeah, that's not good. And this is the only time you're going to see it for season 4, most
season
likely.
4.
It's not. Yeah, it's not going to be back around ever. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of those things where I do feel like it's important that Time Walking Mythic Plus feels rewarding and exciting and is fun as an event. But I don't think any limited time events like something like Legion Time Walking, which we're not going to see again for an extended period of time, we're not going to see again this season, like you said, has pieces of gear that certain individuals can acquire if they can play intensely during that week, potentially acquire, it's still a drop chance, that set them apart from other players because they're the best of the whatever it is, trinket that they need or ring that they need or whatever it is, right? I know a lot of melee people were farming the ring that makes your white hits hit harder, like your basic attacks hit harder. And that just being
if you attack fast in melee, then that's a really good ring, and no other item has an effect.
Exactly. So I feel like there needs to be some tuning addressed on Legion stuff. It's neat to have exciting gear out of there and good pieces out of there. I would rather they not be better than anything in the current expansion, or even top 2 or top 3. Like I'm fine with them being like the 5th or 6th trinket you might want to use, or a very niche situation one that makes like this particular encounter easier because you had this particular trinket that gives you a whole bunch of armor and it's all physical based or whatever. It's something like that where you're like, oh, this would be a cool thing to get. But I dislike what it's like, no, really, this is the best trinket in the game. There's these other ones that are kind of on par with it, but this is really the best one. And it comes from this 1 week only event that you only are going to see once this season. And you're not going to see again for 4 months.
You can't even pick the sort, right? You're still at the mercy of whatever keystones are available. With either for you or with your group, or it listed, in the dungeon finder. Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. Actually, I don't think it's good. I think they should probably rethink this. And I was talking to some people that I play with, in guild and stuff about it, and it occurred to me like, why don't they just replace the loot tables of these dungeons with whatever current season dungeons there are. So you could sort of double up even a chance on dungeons to run for stuff that you wanted. Like, I don't know. Instead, we have the situation where there are some extremely powerful items in these dungeons that you can only get 2 or 3 times a year. You only have the chance to get, and there's no guarantee you're even going to be able to do the dungeon that rewards it, or that, it's going to drop no matter how many times you run that dungeon. We have enough of that problem with the dungeon pool as it is, with the dungeons that we can do every week, right? So, I don't know. I think it would be better overall if they just replace those loot tables. Just copy paste one dungeon's loot table over the time walking keystone. And are we going to have BFA time walking during Dragonflight? And if so, are we going to have keystones for that? And this is not a problem that's likely to just go away, or it's going to be restricted just to this, because if they follow that Legion model with every incoming time walking event, it's going to be an overwhelming amount of information for players, and you're going to be at the mercy of many different dice rolls for what keys you have access to. And then if there's a particular item that you do need, it's going to be that much harder to try to find it, right? So what if there's an item you really need from Legion and an item you really need from BFA, and then those 2 events are like 3 weeks apart, and you have to just slam dungeons all month? Like, I don't think that's the experience people really want for these types of rewards.
Here's an alternate solution that I think is worth considering as well. The dinar is a really interesting piece of tech that they sort of added into the game. What if completing your 5 time walking dungeons gave you a dinar that you could spend at the time walking vendor to buy 1 piece of gear from that time walking vendor that comes from any of the dungeons from that time walking?
Yeah, I think you could certainly do some kind of currency type solution, right? Where you just spend like some predetermined amount of time. You can estimate about how long it's going to take you to do it, and then you can choose a reward. I mean, they already have the time walking vendor in there.
Yep. You just be adding all of the loot table from all the dungeons to that vendor, and you'd be going, if you complete the quest that they already have existing as well, just add the reward to the quest. You get this token for completing 5 time walking dungeons, and you can go to this vendor and buy one of these pieces of gear, which you can then upgrade with Valor or whatever else you want to do. You can incorporate into those systems if you want. That's fine. I just think it would be that would be an interesting solution to this issue.
Yeah, anything would be better, right? Like that suggestion would preserve the items, right? So the effects of those items and stuff would live on, and they would continue to have some relevance and stuff. But you would still have the time limiting problem, because the vendor and the ability to do the weekly would only exist for that week. So if there's a bad week at work, or you're out of town, or you're on vacation, or something,
you just miss out. Yep.
Then you miss it for the entire season, probably. I mean, this also goes into some of the conversations we've had at length about like maybe Legion time walking should just be available all the time. Maybe time walking should be a weekly rotation so that we see Legion time walking and the Keystones 3 times a season instead of 1 or more. I mean, these are, I think anything that they did would be better than where we are at the moment, which is there's a lot of pressure on that 1 week when it lines up in the season.
Yeah. I agree. Anyways, that was my sort of semi-Legion rant that I wanted to get out of the way at the top, just because I really felt that this week of realizing like how many people. I mean, I'm at the point with season 4 where I'm like, gear isn't really what I'm like. We're literally about to replace all of this going into a new expansion, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to stress myself out over not getting something, but it was a problem that I saw that could definitely reoccur, especially if they add BFA time walking in next expansion. And so
it's just going to keep getting worse if they don't change anything. Yeah.
Getting ahead of that problem, I think, is important. Anyways, last week we did clear both Heroic and Mythic Sepulcher of the first ones. That got all cleared out. The 5% nerf on health must have helped with that a little bit, I'm sure, on some of these bosses with just hitting the appropriate breakpoints. The affixes I continue to incredibly dislike. I think it's a really bad system.
Same.
I think it is a system that is not making the encounters more enjoyable. And I think anything you add to a game like that should make raids more fun and more interesting. And it's making raids more of a pain. That's what I've noticed. Is particularly for us this past week, Lehuvum was like it was the consistent debuff that we seem to dislike, which is the one that accelerates time. So it gives you all your cooldowns happen faster. But the other issue is all your debuffs also expire faster while the thing is on you. And so with Lehuvum, your motes are dropping earlier. And the worst part about it actually is you have to dispel the target and then soak the puddles. And on a lot of fights, that creates a lot of complications. Lehuvum, for whatever reason, puts the debuff on 4 targets on Mythic. So you have 4 dispels that have to go out, and you have 8 puddles that then have to be soaked, which is like, this is bizarre. And
yeah, that's very disruptive.
It's very disruptive.
And if you miss the soaks, like that's not negligible. You can't really ignore that. You can't miss the soak. Like you have to be disrupted. You have to submit to the disruption.
Yeah. And so motes were dropping faster, which made everyone's timing on dropping their motes and getting out from under them before they exploded and dealt half the person's health and damage to them was hard on those players. And then also just in general, the concept of that fight being very, very much about positioning, having one person who's just a little bit too far out, who gets dispelled, who then puts a soak that's like 40 yards out from the group that everyone has to dive to try and get to in time, is incredibly disruptive to that fight. And it's a fight that's pretty early on in there. Like you like I don't feel like that's a last 3 bosses kind of encounter, but that was like we wiped more on Lehuvum than we did on Mythic Jailer. Or on Rygalon, or on any of the last bosses. Like Lehuvum was a more challenging boss this past week, just because of having to deal with that debuff and also some of the tuning. The ad's health was higher than we expected it to be at all. We actually had to change our strategy as to which ads we were summoning when, just because we were struggling so much with certain ads, which was rough. So it was just not a well-tuned boss with an affix that made the boss that much more complicated and more of a pain. So I'm disappointed with the affix system. I want it gone, and I think that should be very clear by now with the amount that we've talked about it. Right. That same affix that we talked about was on Jailer, and it was a big red flag for a lot of teams because of the timing of having to do those soaks with having to line of sight the Jailer with his mind control effect. You often had a lot of people getting mind controlled while they're trying to do soaks. Having to do the soaks before bombs, where then people would get bombs and their timers would be sped up, which meant it was way harder to judge when you were supposed to jump into the hole. So a lot of people were either jumping too early and falling to their death, or jumping too late and exploding all over the raid. So that was another huge issue. There's just a lot of here's a great one that you didn't experience because I don't think you see this mechanic anymore on Heroic. Maybe you do. Dispelling in the last phase of Jailer and having the soak puddles be inside Defile. Thanks, Blizzard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
that
a great
to us
one.
One time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was the what is it called? Creation Spark. That should just not be on Jailer. Like they should not do that again. Like I don't know if it's totally randomized or what, but it felt terrible. It was just a miserable experience to do like heroic Jailer. We did normal too, and normal wasn't too bad. He does a little bit less stuff in phase 1, so phase 1 was really the biggest problem because you have to do the dance so much with the Creation Spark going out. But yeah, that fight really heavily relies on positioning, and Creation Spark is something that really messes with positioning, and not in like a fun or interesting or creative way. It's just a pain.
Yeah.
I think like having this raid rotation, now that we've been through the whole rotation, like it's all been pretty much fine and decently fun, except all the end bosses. Even the one that I like didn't feel good, right? Which is Jailer. I think it's okay. Like I think it's actually cool to have. We're very late in the expansion. We have this rotation where, at least for now, like you sort of have this thing that's presented to you each week that has at least some freshness. We weren't in there last week. We weren't even in there the week before. That's cool. You know, you have this big pool of rewards, so you can mix and match different items and different bonuses in a way that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of big wins there. The faded affixes are not one of them. The best ones are the ones that you can kind of just ignore and they provide you some small benefit. And the ones that are high impact, either in terms of the reward or the cost, they're, to me and from what I've experienced with my group, they're not really that. They don't add any fun element to the fights. They just make them more obnoxious. So I would love to see this concept return for the end of Dragonflight, but let's tune the bosses down a little bit and let's not do anything like, kiss curse affixes added to the bosses. We'll keep it a bit more simple, and I think it would be a big success. It would be really fun to have that wide range of raid bosses you could do, huge, variety of different rewards you could get to mix and match. And you're doing the fights as they were designed, not adding this layer of frustration on top of them.
Yeah, I also want to emphasize, I definitely want to emphasize that the rotation of raids is fun, provided the difficulty is hitting the mark. Last week, the difficulty hit the mark. I think it was bang on for, with the exception of Lahuvum and some complications there. I think, like, really, boss health-wise, damage-wise, we were able to clear everything. It felt good. I had no real concerns. That was great. But I do want to address the other system for me. Dinar, I think, works great. Really happy with Dinar as far as how that works. The upgrade token thing is starting to bother the crap out of me because as cool as I think that system is, and as much as I like that system, it was really disappointing to have a system that is entirely based around, hey, if you're in for more bosses this week inside a Mythic Raid team, you're going to be able to upgrade this item sooner than everyone else. At one point this week, people were starting. Like we had 5 or 6 people on our team, obviously tanks who are in for every fight, and some of the healers who are in for every fight, who are upgrading pieces to Mythic, and we're all joyous and happy about it. And there were other members of our team who were only 14 of 20. There were 6 bosses away, which means they weren't going to get it last week, and they probably will get it this week at some point, but it'll be halfway through the raid or whatnot through the raid on this week. And by that point, the other group of people who are in for all the bosses are now even farther ahead towards getting a second piece towards their, like, eventually they're going to start lapping them as far as they'll have 4 or 5 upgrades by the time the quote unquote average person has gotten, 2 or 3. And I think that is super disappointing as a system. I would much rather have something similar to Dinar where it's capped per week and that it's a lower threshold. Like, if the goal is to not allow people to earn Mythic upgrades within a certain time window, like you want to be sure people have to go 3 weeks or 2 weeks before earning one, then just make a quest that requires you to kill 3 bosses on Mythic or whatever difficulty. That is a weekly quest that gets you an item that you can then upgrade when you get 2 or 3 of them. Like, that to me is much better of a system than going, hey, you have to be in for as many bosses as possible, and as long as you're in for as many bosses as possible, you're going to get these large upgrades. I'm all for, during a progression period or whatnot, anyone on our team getting upgrades and getting lucky. I think that's great. I'm all for our team's power in general growing, But I have to acknowledge that with a system that is based off of heroic and mythic rating, having something where if you're not in for a boss or you miss a night or whatever it is, you're dramatically punished is not a great system. Having things that are lower
especially
in
with
cap better.
With like flex heroic rating, where people show up late to my raids all the time,
right? And then they miss 2 bosses, and suddenly they're
and then they got to go back and like try to find pugs or something. Like there's no way we can run it again. Like I guess we could start another ID, but like we don't have enough tunes where it's like, okay, we're actually going to go in and do a alt heroic or something. Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, and I think it's something they should carry forward.
Yep.
But yeah, there's other ways to gate it. Like even if it's like kill 5 bosses a week or something,
sure.
or maybe there's some kind of incremental process where like you don't have to complete the quest within a week, right? So you need 5 kills total. So if your team can only kill like 2 bosses, then you do that every week, and then you can go turn the quest in or whatever. There's a lot of different ways they could approach it. It is a problem right now where to me there's kind of 2 problems with it. One of them is more for me personally, I guess. Like what you've identified, for sure, it sucks on heroic or mythic. There's on any team there's a decent chunk of raiders who aren't going to kill every single boss in the raid in a given lockout, and so that stinks for the way that the ciphers work. The other thing is like, it's cool that you can get a drop from LFR or normal and then upgrade it to a more relevant item level if you're playing, higher level raid content. But I don't love having this kind of compulsion to go queue up for LFR and, maybe try to pencil in normal bosses on mains to try to
you're having the
get
Torghast
extra
problem.
chances at drops. Yeah,
you're turning it into a chore. I see.
Sort of, yeah. It's like I don't really want to do this content, and I know that like I don't have a good chance of getting the drop that I'm targeting, but it could happen. Therefore, I should do it while it's available. And like, I don't know. It's less bad for like the normal thing, I think, because normal raid is pretty fun. Like if you have a fun group to play with, like, yeah, okay. LFR is totally a chore, and it's like, okay, what raid's up this week? Okay, what do I need out of there? Which wings should I do? And how close to reset can I do them so I can get the best possible LFR groups? I haven't had bad experiences in LFR this season, like because people are motivated to participate in it, I guess, but I would prefer just not to have that tug like, hey, there's that trinket on that boss. If you do the LFR version, you might get it, and then you could upgrade it. Like, I'd rather just have more ways to target or work towards the thing I want from the content I'm already enjoying doing.
I wouldn't mind if they removed LFR from the Fated pool in the sense that it dropped static item level pieces that were not Fated pieces, which meant they couldn't be upgraded. That wouldn't bother me in the least. I think there are people out there who that would bother, who enjoy having many avenues to try and get that piece of gear they're looking for. But I think the Dinar kind of fills out that weird space. And as long as we have a system like the Dinar in, I think that covers a lot of the bases. But I do have to tell a good story from LFR this past week because this happened to me. And it was something that I do enjoy about LFR every now and then is you do run into these situations where I ran LFR last week specifically to kill Rygalon, to try and get the Antumbra weapon that drops off, the caster weapon that drops off of him, and was in there, and you have to do the whole you have to do Anduin into Lords into Rygalon is what that wing is. So I sort of healed through the whole thing, got to Rygalon, killed Rygalon, got the chest piece to drop, which I already had on Heroic, so I already have a Fated piece that I can upgrade, so I don't need it. And noticed that another druid in the group got Antumbra to drop, and this was a healing druid. And so I actually congratulated them in a whisper, and then in a second whisper said, I happen to get the chest piece. If that's what you were looking for, I was actually looking for that weapon if you wanted to trade. And this person immediately opened the trade window with me and threw the weapon in. And I was like,
whoa, the dream.
Awesome. Like the dream of someone friendly and nice. And so we did the trade, and I said, thank you very much. This is what I was in here looking for. And they were like, oh, I hope you have a great day. And we sort of like had a little nice interaction. And I was like, this is the amazing moments that can happen in World of Warcraft.
Everybody wins.
Where everybody wins, right? This is a weapon that, as a Resto Druid, can be very good if you know how to use it properly and when to use it properly. Because you need to cast damage spells to be able to get stacks of a buff and then trigger that buff at particular times to be able to optimize using for it. Because it's one of those weapons that doesn't have secondary stats. So there's a lot of weapons that drop right now, especially with the Dinar that you can buy, like the weapon off of Sardonathras, the weapon off of Kel'Thuzad, that are just, here's a weapon, it has really big stats on it, go to town, right? And so to be able to use that weapon properly, it's kind of a pain in the butt. Autumnbra properly as a Rescue Druid is kind of a pain in the butt. But I also play Boomkin, and it's a very, very strong weapon for Boomkin. So I wanted it just in general, because I needed it for both of my specs. So it was great that this person didn't feel they needed it. They were going to probably spend their dinar on something else if that's what they're going to do weapon-wise, and was willing to trade. So, yeah, shout out to that person. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah. So, I don't know. LFR has its moments, but the only reason, like literally the only reason I was in there, the only reason was for that one particular piece of gear. And did it make the LFR go smoother? I'm sure it did, because on most bosses I was tripling the next person's healing because I made, mythic geared raider.
Right, you're out gearing LFR
by like, 50 item levels or whatever it is. Yeah, right? So, that's one of those things. So sure, it probably made the runs go smoother, but the only reason I was in there was for this chance of this thing happening. I was just fortunate enough that it did happen. It didn't happen for me the week before. And we talked about what was happening in Sanctum, where I ran all 4 difficulties trying to get a particular trinket, and then I just happened to luckily get it out of the chest for the weekly dungeon drop or whatever it was, or whatever, just happened to get the trinket out of there. But otherwise, ran those bosses on 4 different difficulties and did not get the piece of gear that I was looking for, which was where the Dinar kind of comes in. So I'd be fine if them removing Fated from LFR. I think that would be a fine decision to make, and make it a, hey, it encourages people to run normal, encourages people to run mythic if that's what they want to do to try and target pieces of loot. But going to LFR is a great way to sort of get your character geared up for doing normal and doing mythic, as opposed to you can run LFR every week and get a whole bunch of Fated gear and then go into a heroic raid and start upgrading all those pieces. I think is a little bit less, I don't know, it's just less attractive to me. As you said, there's this tug having to go and do LFR every week as something you need to do. Although I'm probably done doing that at this point. I think my urge to do that has come to terms with the fact that we are so close to Dragonflight launching that gear is just like, eh.
Yeah, it's nice if you can get it, and you've killed all the bosses now, right? Or just about. So it's like, what else do you really need it for if you can get that far? Like, there's nothing else coming up, Yeah, I mean, for me, I checked the Old Warrior Soul off the list this week.
Nice.
I got my 20 dinar and I went and bought that, and I had Cypher, so I upgraded it to Heroic. That's just an item I don't really want to have to farm. It drops from Sylvanas. It's just kind of a really good all-around warrior trinket. So it just makes the most sense to spend my first coin on.
Right.
And yeah, this way I don't have to queue up for LFR Sylvanas next week. I will still probably do some LFR Sanctum if I don't get lucky in Heroic, but I don't. It's nice you can queue for Sylvanas by yourself, but man, that fight is, it's not the fight that I want to be doing. I don't want to do that any more than I have to. So it was kind of the obvious choice for me off the bat, especially in this new world where you can't get a relevant item level scale. The blood spattered scale is dead. I'm still using it because I haven't found anything better yet. But so that was nice. And now it's like, okay, what do I target next? And now I can kind of wait and see, because there's really not much from Nathria that's attractive, but I won't be able to buy anything else this week. So
no, next week. So this week is no dinars. If you've been killing all the bosses every week to sort of complete the quest, last week was your first dinar. This week is no dinar. Next week is 2 dinars. Just so that's clear, is how that progress is going to work.
Yeah, so I'm going to wait until I get some more time in Sanctum, because it has all the, it has some juicy tank trinkets still.
Right.
But, yeah, so that felt pretty good. I'm glad to have that off. It's cool to have something that's like that powerful that you just went and picked it up and now you check it off the list. Like now you can benefit from it for the rest of the season. It's a great system. So this is the kind of stuff that, I know they're selling season 4 as experimental and it's kind of whatever. It's, none of this stuff really matters. Nothing's set in stone as far as like the future of the game. But, this is the kind of thing I think should definitely be carried forward in some fashion, even if it's not this exact kind of timing and implementation, but a way to say like, hey, you spent a lot of time, and effort in this raid defeating these bosses. If you didn't get what you wanted, then how would you like one of these things, right? Like it's something we should have had a long time ago, I think. And
Agreed.
I mean, I kind of detailed on the show during Sanctum of Domination my struggles with getting a particular Sylvanas drop, and we had a hunter in the group who never got the bow and still didn't get it with the first Sylvanas kill of this season. Like, stuff like that just is demoralizing. It really, like, I mean, there's sort of the piece of like, well, if you have everything you want, then like, why do you come back next week? Or like, why are you playing that character still or whatever? But it goes just as hard in the other direction, where it's like, why do I even bother when the stuff that I want just never shows up? And so I think I think it would behoove them to keep something, even if it's not this exact same thing, and with progression rating and stuff. Once there's a new season out in Dragonflight, like maybe it takes a little bit longer to get that first item or something, or but maybe the selection of items is wider. Maybe it's like anything for your spec or something. I mean, maybe there's not like a hard limit on how many of them you can get, because who knows how long that first season's going to go on. So maybe that's a way to keep people invested and trying to keep killing bosses and finding higher difficulties and stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of potential there to keep the raid feeling relevant and rewarding.
Yeah, no, I think, I haven't spent my first dinar yet. I still have mine, mainly because whatever I bought with it, I don't currently have enough ciphers to upgrade. So there's no motivation to actually buy anything at the moment, because
right. It might not be a straight upgrade. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like I could get that piece to drop before I even get enough ciphers to upgrade it. So basically, because I got the trinket out of that reward box, it meant that I then upgrade that to heroics. That's where my first heroic one went to. I'm 18 of 20 for my mythic, which means I'll get mythic earlier this week at some point, and I'll probably dump that into my weapon that I have, the Entumbra that I have. So that'll probably go up to being a mythic one. And then I have to kill another 20 bosses on mythic before I can upgrade another piece to mythic, which means there's really very little motivation for me to buy a normal trinket at any point, or a normal weapon or a normal whatever. So I'm just kind of hanging out, man, at this point. I'll probably end up with 3 dinars in my bag, waiting on killing enough bosses to be able to upgrade a piece to be relevant enough to put on my character. That's what I feel like I'll probably be doing. So
yeah, it's kind of a weird spot to be in, but it might work out in your favor, because if you get some drop luck, then you can really just max out on some other stuff. So that could be good.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, there's really no rush for me at the moment to sort of buy something and commit down a certain path. At this point. Today, out of my vault, I got my Elegy, which was great. So I'm very happy to get that, which means I now have the majority of trinkets that I could want. I got my Sigil to drop from Raid last week when we killed Pantheon. So I got Sigil from there. I got Elegy out of my chest, out of my vault. I have the heroic version of the Shadowed Orb of Torment, which I need to upgrade to Mythic. And those are really the king trinkets out of the raids, outside of, obviously, the Prism and the Amalgam Spine that I mentioned came out of Legion Time Walking last week, which I have neither of. So that's where that's at. But we will see.
Man, look at you, just racking it up. Well, you don't even need to spend those things. Whatever.
That's where I'm. Yeah, that's things are working out okay. All right. As far as Mythic Plus goes, last week, like I said, I ran a bunch of Legion stuff. I didn't push any super crazy high keys. There was one night where we were going to try and push a 26 Junkyard, but timing didn't really work out for everyone meeting up. So that was going to be fun to try and do a really high, sort of higher end key. But yeah, outside of that, it was, I mean, that was about it. I was pretty busy this past week with stuff outside of WoW. So did what I could and feel fine about it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's all you can do, right? In my case, I ended up doing, I think 8 or maybe 9, 15 plus keys. So on the Warrior, I didn't end up playing any other tunes really this week very much. But I mean, Keystones are feeling great. I think they're the most fun thing this season. I think it's more fun than Raid. And I think the reward structure being more open-ended with the lack of Valor Cap and everything feels really good. So, and with Creation Catalyst just being available and kind of copious amounts of charges on it, just really, it feels like a good use of my time is busting dungeons out. We got a plus 19 in time. That was my highest key so far this season. I can't even remember which one it was. Probably Junkyard, I would guess, considering how much easier Junkyard seems to be than the field. But yeah, really good time there. And except for Lower Kara, we stepped into a Lower Kara like 16 or something, and first boss was just borderline impossible, because with explosive and with when all the Hosen spawn in and they all pop explosives, yeah, we just walked out of that one and did something else. So Lower Kara still needs some help. It's just kind of all over the place. But this is not a new situation for Lower Kara. This is what Lower Kara was like in Legion too.
Yeah.
Other than that, my big side project right now, which I think might actually be my last side project of Shadowlands, is doing all the Covenant campaigns on a character of each of the 4 different armor classes. So I finished up all the Covenant campaigns on my Hunter. So I got all the male appearances for finishing the campaigns, which are some really nice looking armor sets. And I don't have too many good looking male armor sets. And historically, there have been some really weird looking male armor sets, but all the Covenant ones, like for the campaigns, are really nice. So I got all that done, which was cool. There's a bug with the Venthyr campaign, apparently, that's been around for months now, where if you switch to Venthyr, I guess sometimes the first step of the campaign doesn't complete, so you don't get the gloves and you don't finish the set.
Oh.
So you have to open a ticket. They're aware of it. There's a support post about it and everything. But if anybody else is doing this kind of stuff, just keep this in mind. You may have to. You may have to reach out to customer service, but my next on the list is Cloth. I finished up Necrolord, which is really a hideous looking set on a male human. And I don't think any of the Cloth sets are very nice looking, but I've decided that this is the thing I want to collect. So I'm going ahead on it, and I'll knock all those out. And then I think, I'll have 2 plate sets and 3 leather sets to do. It's a lot of doing the campaigns over and over again, but I love collecting Mog sets and stuff and having a way to do it where it's not like, oh, I hope this piece drops off of this old raid boss this week. You just go through and you're going to get it if you finish these quests. It's nice. So, but I think once I'm done with that, that's probably all my sort of weird little, end of expansion goals for this one.
Cool. Yeah, I think having goals is always important, but I also think deciding when you're going to wind things down is also equally as important. So if you're figuring, yeah, you know what, I think I'm getting to that point where I'm going to start, wrapping stuff up with Shadowlands, I think this is the right time to be doing it. So good call on that. All right, but let's jump into what's going on this week, because we do have some stuff we want to chat about. All right, folks, it's the Pet Battle bonus event. Yet again, this event rolls around. It means the Pet Battle experience gained is increased by 200%, and there's a quest to win 5 PvP Pet Battles, and that rewards 1 Ultimate Pet Battle Training Stone, which instantly levels any pet to 25. And moving on, Oribos, we have the weekly Zereth Mortis quest, and we also have Patterns Within Patterns that you can pick up, and you can do those quests to sort of help complete the Patterns Within Patterns quest faster if you do a new deal. We are back into Castle Nathria, which means that we do not have Antros being faded. We actually have Orana Monos, the Ever-Branching, being faded. This means that we, you still want to kill Antros to get the faster progression towards your Patterns Within Patterns quest, but if you are looking for some higher item level loot, Orana Monos, the Ever-Branching, the faded, is dropping your plate, waist, mail, wrist, leather hands, and legs. So leather wares, there's some tier pieces for you, cloth feet, and a crit verse ring, which could be nice for some tank targets, I know, like some crit and some verse on some monks and whatnot. And Jason, which memories does Orana Monos drop for the legendaries?
So you got Fevered Incantation for mages, Surging Shots for hunters, and Verdant Infusion for druids. So if you got a mage, hunter, or druid and you don't know all your memories, then make sure you do this week. There's a lot of good reasons to do this week, so I don't think I need to sell it to you too hard.
No. PvP quests, we have arenas and arena skirmishes. So unfortunately, these are not the same thing. You have to run arenas and you have to run skirmishes to complete these 2 quests. You can't just do arenas and complete the skirmish one at the same time. That would be really nice. That's not a thing. And PvP brawl-wise, we have Soshore versus Terran Mill. And so, obviously, this is the old-school brawl that came back for the 10th anniversary of WoW. And, basically have a whole bunch of Death Knights on your team in this 40 versus 40 deathmatch, because they will just yoink people into your group and you'll finish them off quickly. And it's awesome. If you don't have a lot of Death Knights, then your best bet is probably to never push up past halfway to your opponent's base. Let them push to you. They then have the longer run back from their corpses, which means you're most likely to roll in the most kills, which is great. Just don't overextend too far. You'll get the Something Different quest, which gives you some Marks of Honor, Conquest, and Honor for completing it. And this is always kind of a nice harken back. It's the only way you can see South Shore before it was destroyed like entirely. Like it's
the old assets, right? Like the old layout for South Shore. Yeah, this one is cool because you don't really need to. There's not a lot of technique. I mean, you kind of mentioned all the technique that exists, right? Like, just don't go too deep and try to pull them deeper to your team and kill them.
Yep.
And this is like what World PvP used to be like, and it's fun. I mean, there's not a lot of technique that you need to know. So this is a good one. And if you need something, if you're working on something where you need to hit like a certain amount of HKs or something, this is a really good way to get HKs fast. So check that out this week.
Yeah. Mythic Plus wise, Fortified, Bursting, and Storming, so non-boss enemies have more health and inflict increased damage. When slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer damage over time. And while in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds. So these whirlwinds knock you up in the air, and they do damage to you. And actually, one of our patrons in our Discord raised a fairly good concern about Storming, which we'll talk about in a moment. But overall, these affixes are not fantastic in general, because Fortified and Bursting can work well together, but can also be pretty painful. Fortified means obviously your trash is hitting you a lot harder, so any trash heavy dungeons, something like Lower Karazhan, for example, where you have things like ushers, certainly will hurt a lot and do a lot of damage. They also mean inside those dungeons where you have very large poles, bursting can then become a much larger factor where your team's taking a lot of damage as mobs die, and because this affects stacks, and whenever you kill a mob, it refreshes the stack of that 4-second damage over time, you have to be really careful. Now, Fortified can work in your favor, making lower health mobs have more hit points, which means your initial AoE doesn't just kill a whole bunch of them and create a large bursting stack that you're not going to live through. You have a little bit more leeway to sort of control your damage and lowering their health regularly. But it is a little bit more dangerous, and Fortified will make the dungeon a bit more of a slog. Storming, because it displaces your character, this is an interesting one, because the point that a patron raised was Flame Wreath in Upper Karazhan. And how does Storming work with Flame Wreath? Because if you have Flame Wreath, you can't move, and if you hit by Storming, it launches you into the air. So is this going to be one of those things where we now run into the problem of that dungeon just being impossible to do if you get Flame Wreath? Or is it something where they've actually addressed it ahead of time where that's not going to happen? And when I say that knowing that we had a debuff you could dispel that landed in Defile on Jailer, where it's like, how much are they really thinking these things through when it comes to these sorts of situations? So Storming and Flame Wreath, I'm really curious as to what this interaction is going to feel like for players.
It's going to go one way or the other. Either you stand still and you eat the Storming, and because it displaced you and you didn't move, that it doesn't break the Flame Wreath, or it's impossible and you can't kill the boss if you cast Flame Wreath.
Yeah, that's
one or the other. It's either just to hold still and deal with it and take the bump,
like
or you have
people playing goalie constantly. Like literally, the people who do not have Flame Wreath, their entire job is running around and eating Stormings.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess it would work. It would technically work. It's not tyrannical, so it'll die faster. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I haven't done it yet. I think I did get an Upper Kara key, so I might try it. I don't know.
Why did you miss your interrupt? That person died in Flame Wreath because of it. Because I was soaking a Storming from them and I wasn't near the boss.
I was out of melee range. Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah. So there could be some concerns that lie with Storming and how Storming's going to work with these new dungeons. There's multiple encounters where Storming could create some really interesting interactions that we haven't seen yet. So I'm curious to see how that's all going to run and lay out. But yeah, overall, probably not a terrible week as long as Storming isn't toxic, I guess is what I would make as a point.
I mean, that's the worst interaction I can think of, and we don't really know exactly what's going to happen there. But it could be really bad. It could render Upper Kara a dead key, but I think Lower Kara was a dead key last week, more or less. It's just kind of, and that kind of shows the age of those dungeons as keystones. We don't have dead keys anymore, but we used to all the time.
Right.
I think overall this is the best combo we've seen in Season 4. And I think this is going to be a good week to get some fort rating if you need it. Yes, fort bursting can be obnoxious. Storming is way less annoying than it used to be. It is relatively minor, I would say. It's melee volcanic, right?
Right.
For the most part. But yeah, fort bursting is like, it is kind of a double-edged sword for the reasons you mentioned. Like sometimes it's good that they're fortified because then they die farther apart and you don't get huge bursting stacks, so that can be a plus. It can also be a problem because you're in combat for longer, and then when stuff dies you might be already beat up and then bursting starts kicking in. But overall, I mean, I would rather see these, I think, than what we've seen so far this season, which is a lot of like big time movement disruption or target switching pressure or something like that. Like this is more just like kill stuff, just kill it as much as you can kill it, and maybe hold up if you get high bursting, but maybe in like lower Kara or something where you might be fighting 8 mobs at once. Like, maybe don't burst all them like, one after the other and have bursting for, I don't know, 16 seconds straight or 24 seconds straight or something. Like, it's never like it takes off and then you refresh it and you refresh it over and over again. That could be a problem, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to getting in there this week. I think this is going to be a good week for Keystones with the, with the current pool and everything, and with the ongoing tuning and stuff too. There's some nice changes that we'll touch on as well.
Yep. All right. The Trial of Style is coming up. For those who are curious, it's going to be next Wednesday, so that's the 31st of August, and that's going to run until September 4th. I almost said October because my brain wants it to be fall that badly. That's just how bad I want it to be fall. So that'll run until September 4th, and people can basically group up with their friends or with strangers, go in groups of 6, and vote on who has the best transmog around a particular theme. And you're going to get tickets that you can then use to buy transmog items. There weren't new items the last time this rolled around. However, I hadn't collected all of the shoes, which meant when I went and did it, I actually did get new transmogs, which was great. So we'll see if they add something new here. I would love, if not in this one, but in the next one, we got dragon-themed transmog, would make me very happy. So I think they should look into putting something new into Trial Style. Either they already have, and it's going to happen next Wednesday, and we all get to see it, or the next time we find Trial of Style, which would be in Dragonflight.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath for new stuff because the data would have been in the game by now. And actually probably would have been on the vendor as of one of the recent patches, right? Because the vendor's there, whether you can get the currency or not. But yeah, this is not this week, but it is coming up next week. But we wanted to give some advance notice because Trial of Style is awesome and only happens twice a year. So don't forget the September rotation of Trial is coming up. And yeah, I mean, hopefully we get some new ensembles. Having the boots that they added and stuff, they're fine. I don't think I even bought them because I just don't think I would use them with anything. But when I can go to a vendor and buy a thing and then I unlock a whole bunch of transmog that all fits together and it lights up in my UI, you're like, yeah, that's the good stuff.
Yeah. All right, moving into hot fixes. The auction house obviously had a ton of issues, and they fixed a bug causing incoming amounts to display incorrectly from the sales commodities in full stack, as well as I think they've started to fix you being able to actually buy certain commodities that you just couldn't buy before. It just wouldn't let you, and people were like beginning to post items for really bizarre amounts of gold just because they knew that people couldn't buy them. It was very weird. So there's tons of issues with Auction House. They're still resolving issues with Auction House. Expect there to be issues. Buyer beware. Certainly be careful with this kind of system. Yeah,
there's weird stuff with like Progenitor Essentia right now where like I don't know if it's even possible to buy it, and I don't know. It's not ideal. I'm sure that they want you to be able to sell that stuff, but something happened. I can't imagine it's intentional that you can't sell it, but maybe they decided it would be better for that to be on a specific server than region wide or something. That doesn't really make any sense, but I don't know. It just says like this item is no longer available or something when you go to buy it, and it's annoying because that was a thing that I was not able to move on the old auction house, on my server auction house. I couldn't sell those. I have dozens of them that I would love to get rid of, and somebody needs them, but they don't play on my server. So,
right.
I have a feeling that we'll be talking about auction house bugs and hot fixes and ongoing issues for a little while here, but it's to be expected. Auction house is such an old and rickety part of the game, and we've seen the impacts that it's had on game performance over the years when stuff has changed or whatever. So, no huge surprise here. I mean, I wonder if we were having some really bad latency issues and stuff on Tuesday night. And I wonder if the auction house had anything to do with that, or if it was like just the faded interaction inside the raid. I mean, there's no way for us to know, obviously, but
it was only affecting raids because I was able to run Mythic Plus perfectly fine. So my assumption is it was specific to the raids, and it was probably something to do with affixes. Would have been my guess. Now, obviously they openly admitted in a post that they had no idea what was wrong. So I was like, okay, well, apparently they don't know what it is either. So they're still looking at that. But at least they put out a post. I appreciated that. Because, we basically raided until, maybe an hour. Yeah, it was less than. I think we had an hour and a half left of our raid time. And just went, we're not doing more of this with this condition. We're just not. We're stopping.
It felt, we were trying to do Anduin at the end of the night, and like we would get a good 2 or 3 seconds of just hanging when like Befell Barrier would go out, which is kind of like an important mechanic that people need to move and reposition around.
Dude, the intermission where you're dodging walls and everything freezes and there's a wall coming and you're like, I don't know where my character is. I think it's here. I think
there's a wall here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was weird. I don't. When we were just speculating at this point, this was all sort of. It was Tuesday patch day maintenance. Stuff was not working as intended.
Yeah, exactly. As far as affixes go in Mythic Plus, the Shrouded affix got a nerf, a fairly large one. Apparently, they found that Nathrezim Infiltrator's health and damage was not actually consistent throughout dungeons. So they have resolved that, which should overall make for a net lower amount of damage and ability damage and health that these infiltrators have, so they should be easier to kill. The Vampiric Claws ability also received a cooldown increase by 4 seconds, so it went from 8 seconds to 12, which means that we're going to see that ability slightly less often. So overall, infiltrators should be easier to kill, which I think is great. I mean, they already, to me, weren't super dramatic, impactful mobs in the sense that they were really hard to deal with. But if they're noticing that for some dungeons or some affixes or some keys or whatever it is, some key level, their health was varying by ways it shouldn't and shouldn't be, consistently where it is, then great. And if you're going to adjust everything and make it easier, then perfect. I'm fine with this.
Yeah, this is a great change. And it was palpable to me doing like, mid-teens keys or upper teens keys even. The infiltrators seem to be dying a lot faster than they had been before on average. And I guess, there must have been like fluctuating health pools because sometimes, before this, some infiltrators would just kind of explode and fall over, and some of them seemed like they were in combat forever. And, that was kind of weird, but it was all kind of anecdotal. And, there's a lot of variables and stuff when you're doing a dungeon, right? So it's hard to really gauge in the moment. I think Wowhead did some math and looked at some, data, and it seems like this was about a 17-ish% nerf across most Keystone difficulties for the infiltrators. So, I mean, I don't think with the exception of the mini boss, like I don't think these things are really supposed to be, these super beefy, dangerous parts of the dungeon. Like obviously you have to react to the abilities that they do, but the whole point is that they're there to buff you. So it is nice when they die, right? Like it feels a bit more sort of in line with what we're doing in season 3. Obviously the relic mini bosses were beefier than the infiltrators are at this point, but they also were mostly just sort of a thing that you nuked as you dealt with the rest of the pack and kind of moved on with your day. So this is, I feel like this really brings them in line. It felt really good once I was doing dungeons after this came in, and it's like, okay, I pulled a trash pack and the infiltrator is the first thing getting cleaved to death, right? Like it's lower than these other two things. I'm going to get my buff and the little regen and stuff you get when they capture it. Like amazing.
Yeah. Another change that came in earlier last week was in Grimrail Depot. They made Raccoon, who's the last boss's diffused energy zone positions, be slightly adjusted and have a visual warning now, so you can actually dodge them. So this is the Dragon Breath that flies over the final car. Now has a area that you can see where the Dragon Breath is going to land ahead of the Dragon Breath coming. The reason why this is a problem was because not only did it do initial damage, it also put a dot on you that ticked. And that meant that this was entirely unavoidable in the sense that there was no way for you to actually consistently outplay the dragon breath that was coming in. The only way to do it was to stand on these tiny little like offshoots of the car, where if you fell off and you died, you couldn't be rezzed, which to me is not a solution to this. That's more something they need to resolve, in my opinion. Which maybe they did with the zone positions. Who knows? I didn't actually try it after they did this change, but it is something where having that visual, which I've seen some screenshots of, is very clear. Is very important for all mechanics in general. I think not telegraphing where something's going to hit to give the player an opportunity to react is just weird. Like, why even have it be an ability that's something that happens? Like, you might as well, like, having a dot that ticks or a shout that the boss does that does damage to players, to me, is perfectly acceptable. Having a dragon breathe fire that you just can't dodge and puts a dot on you, that is rough. Because you should be able to see it coming.
Yeah.
Like, that ability you should be able to see coming.
Right, and I mean, this goes back to sort of, this was never designed as a Keystone dungeon, right? And so there was sort of a different philosophy of overall dungeon and boss design back then anyway, because you would never do this on like a really tightly tuned, extremely difficulty setting, right? Like, you'd be doing it on normal or heroic or maybe mythic mode at the end of Warlords, and it's like, well, yeah, you take damage from this. That's just how it works. Like, you just take this damage, then you move out of it. That doesn't work for Keystone. It's not the way we expect them to work in 2022, right?
Yeah.
Like, everything needs to have counterplay now in a way that it didn't 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, I guess, in Grimreal Depot's case. But that's what this strikes me as, especially the diffused energy, the calling out where the zones are.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't, like, in a world with like Grievous, right? You can't just be like, well, yeah, you're going to get hit. You're going to take the you're going to take the hit on Tyrannical Grievous plus 20.
Yeah.
And, then you move to safety after you take the hit. Like, nah, we can't do that anymore.
They also made Spinning Spear correctly assign the stun mechanic, so allowing the loss of control UI to function properly. And then in Iron Docks, the Sanguine Sphere's Absorb now scales with Keystone level, as well as in Lower Karazhan, they did a whole bunch of health nerfs. Basically, Galindra and Alfira's health was reduced by 35%. The Winged Assistant's throw stuff damage reduced by 40%. Winged Assistant's health was reduced. Galindra's Flashy Bolt was reduced, and Alfira's Defy Gravity was reduced. They're all reduced. And then Attunement of the Huntsman will no longer cast Intangible Presence. I am shocked at this change. Last week, they went in and basically gave it a damage nerf to give people more time to react. Now they're just taking it out entirely. They're just like, you know what? Yep, this ability isn't one that we want to try and fix or play around with at all. We're just going to remove it, which means healers no longer have to dispel on that boss, which feels very strange because it was such a fundamental mechanic. It will make that boss way less stressful to do, which I think makes sense for what is supposed to be, quote unquote, the first boss of that raid when it was a raid. However, it's kind of the last or second to last boss that people tend to kill now with how they do the bosses in that dungeon. So it seems it's a little strange to see a nerf to, quote unquote, the last boss of that dungeon. But yeah, I guess they just decided it was something that they didn't want to play around with then this season at all. They're just taking it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it goes back to just bringing stuff more in line with the way modern keys feel and being able to dial it in more. The nerfs to Wicket are huge and amazing and welcome, but why did they come in last night?
Exactly. Yeah,
we're not going to be on Wicket for 2 more weeks now. It was brutal. It was brutal last week. Like, this boss was undoable last week, and they probably knew that, and it didn't get changed until reset. It wasn't even live last night. These came in these were published Monday night, but they didn't go in until maintenance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Lower Kara keeps getting more approachable, and that's good. So I'm happy about that. I wish they had done this on Tuesday or Wednesday night instead of, Tuesday reset when this opera is cycling out for 2 weeks.
All right. So with the Auction House commodity stuff changing, there was also a hotfix one that changed the cost of Penumbra Thread to 11 gold from 9 gold. I say the price change is to balance the decreased cost of reagents with the change to a regional commodity auction house. So I find this interesting that they are changing the cost of an item that comes off a reagent vendor because of the auction house commodity change to try and balance out some economy stuff. This is a strange one to me, but I'm not the economy expert when it comes to World of Warcraft. So I guess this is something that was necessary. I don't know. This is weird to me.
I guess this is just to me, this is just a bad change. Like,
Yeah.
I think the vendor mats were already way too expensive in this expansion. And this feels really unnecessary. Like, but whatever. There you go. If you were confused as to why your Penumbra thread was more expensive than you thought it was, this is why. I guess bears noting that if you're, exalted with your Covenant faction, there's probably a vendor in your sanctum that sells the trade mats, and you get the exalted discount on them. So
Yeah, let's keep
that
in mind.
offsets the price of that, a little bit at least. So take advantage of that. But yeah, this is whatever. I mean, I guess they felt like this was a place they could add a gold sink if people were getting cloth more cheaply, which if you were on a low pop server with the new auction house, like the price of cloth has plummeted for sure. But I don't know, like, do we really need to have some sort of like inherent, gold cost, at least in terms of like vendor mats and some rough ballpark of what the match should cost for Shadowlands legendaries? Like, let's just move on.
It's just weird to me to do it at this stage of the expansion. That's what's weird to me, right? Like Penumbra Thread's not going to.
It's so late.
It's not going to be a thing in Dragonflight. Like, how much gold is this removing from the average player? Like, it's just very strange to me. I don't know. It's odd to do at this stage because moving in the next expansion, all these reagents are going to be null and void because there'll be all new things that were most likely. I don't think Penumbra Thread's being brought over to Dragonflight, which means what was the point? It's just weird. Anyways, moving on. Fix an issue where items purchased with the puzzling cartel dinar could not be refunded. I don't know who was buying items by accident off of the vendors with their dinar, but I am someone who every time I open those vendors, I'm like super cautious and careful about where I'm looking and clicking and what's going on with it because it's a very rare, highly used piece of equipment that you're buying. So I don't know, but they fixed that for people.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who's worked in end user support for a long portion of their career, I can say that anything can and will happen. And,
this does just remove a lot of tickets. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like stuff just happens, man. I don't know. Your cat jumped on the keyboard or something when you were at the vendor.
Your dinar.
And,
oops, I bought the tank trinket. Oops, darn. Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can definitely see that happening. So this is why they have like vendor buybacks and stuff to just make it self-service. So, hopefully like reset the timer or something. It would really suck if you get stuck with that, but obviously it's not the intended behavior.
Yeah. They also fixed an issue where Enforcer's stun grenade, Kira's adrenaline injector, and Fleshrender's meat hook did not reset their cooldown when encounter ended. So that all got resolved, which is good because that was unfortunate for a few of our raiders who were like, my trinket didn't reset. Can we wait a minute before we pull the boss again? That's never a fun thing to have to do. So I'm glad
nobody likes that.
Yep. In player versus player, the conquest cap, as we talked about earlier, was removed, so that's gone. Spoils of War is 25% increased conquest and 40% increased honor, and the buff is available in Shadowlands Season 4 until it ends. That happened early last week, so that was great. And the minimum item level for Solo Shuffle moved up to 278, which is also something that happened early last week. All right, and then as far as quests and stuff go, the objective for the raid quest Turning the Wheel now correctly states that 15 bosses are killed and required. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, I want to earn my next dinar. The quest says 20, but the tracker says 15. What is going on? And you're like, well, it's because it's supposed to be 15. They changed that a while back, which means it's 15 for that stage and 5 for the next, which is why I say this week we get no dinars, but next week we get 2 dinars. Is kind of exciting for a lot of players if you're clearing the raids. So yeah, it's we're getting there. Mm-hmm. I also wouldn't be surprised if they announced at some point this week that next week all of the raids were going to be available as Fated, or sometime the week after. I don't think they're going to hold out too much longer. I know they initially set some timelines.
They published a schedule. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they moved it up. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved it up. I think they probably. Yeah. I think it'd be surprising if they didn't move up the Fated thing. To sort of that then lets people get more Fated bosses killed, which then progresses quests faster, et cetera, et cetera. A catch-up mechanic comes in. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So
yeah, I can see that. I mean, I will say it's kind of weird now that we've been through the whole rotation. Now it's weird that something is not available, right? Like now it almost feels like taking a step back, even though we knew it was going to work that way. So I don't know. But yeah, this quest was originally, like when they were originally talking about it, they said it would be, 30 and then 20 and then 10. And then they said, well, it's, we're probably going to, decrease the timeline a little bit for the second and third ones. And so, but when this quest went out, I think it initially went out at 20. It said 20, and then at one point, I think like the quest text said 20, but the objective said 15 or something. So they probably had to push something to actually like update the text. But yeah, this is great. I mean, it I don't know. It sort of makes sense, I guess, to have, okay, once you do like basically the full boss rotation, then you get to buy your first piece, but then speed up the other two. I think that's pretty good. I have a feeling that what we're going to end up in is a world where everybody goes, hey, getting 3 of those was cool, but there's still a couple months until Dragonflight. Can I get another 1 or 2, maybe, or 3? Like, I don't know. The direction that this season is going, I sort of don't see any reason to shut it off. Like, I know that was the stated intent of the system, but I don't know. Why not just keep it going? What's it going to hurt at this point?
Yeah,
we'll see how it develops. I mean, we know that they're open to flexing on some of this stuff, so it would be cool if they were like, hey, you know what? We looked at it, and we're just going to have a repeating quest for 10 dinar, and you can get whatever you want.
I guess I just get the feeling more and more that we're coming up closer and closer to Dragonflight, and it's like, let's move this stuff along a little bit faster.
Right.
And part of why I think opening up all 3 Fated raids as something you can do in a week if you want to is for ciphers, because it means you could earn 30 ciphers a week or whatever it is, the top amount of ciphers a week is what you could earn, which is huge, because then you just start upgrading all of these pieces of gear very quickly if you're running all the raids, if that's something you're doing.
Even if you don't have time to do every single boss and every single raid, you could still get way more than you'd be able to get on the rotation. Like, even if you just dip in and do some easy bosses, you could get 15, which is way more than 10, right? Or even 11. And if you just target all the easy bosses across the 3 raids, you could easily get like 20-ish kills without even really thinking about it.
Yeah, and then there's your upgrade for a piece of gear every week, which I think is probably much more attractive. I mean, I might be just feeling like things need to be moving a lot faster than what they've planned out, but I don't know. That's the vibe I'm getting right now, is that I feel like we are on the hype train towards Dragonflight. Things are coming along pretty well. We're going to move into beta, I assume, soon with Dragonflight stuff. So I think we're getting to that point where it's like, we're going to see pre-patch hit servers, I would imagine October, November at the latest, which means, hey, how many rotations of more of this do you want to do before you just open all these up, right? Because it's the catch-up alone is huge. Like, if you have a new character who then is doing what you just talked about of like 4 or 5 bosses in each raid every week, you're going to start getting huge amounts of upgrades on that character very quickly with these systems that are in place, right? You can get your first dinar super fast because you get
the first week if you put the
put the time in. Exactly, right? So I feel like getting that unlocked sooner for players, I think, would be better than waiting longer. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's also the thing of like, you want to kind of start with the most restrictions in place that you think would be advisable, and then remove them as it goes along, right? So, like, I think the initial launch and rollout has been pretty good, but maybe I don't think it would hurt us to maybe speed up that initially listed timeline, or even some of the initial design intents they were talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing we're going to chat about is a post that came out that actually was done by the WoW narrative designer, Steve Danhauser. This is an interesting post, because typically what we get is, between expansions, we get a book, and the book covers some of what happened between the expansions. So there's an acknowledgement of time has passed, and if you want to read the book, you can figure out what kind of specifically happened in that time, but generally, narratively, we'll catch you up inside the first couple of quests as to where things are sort of at. And I actually haven't read the Sylvanas book. I'm not afraid to admit that, because I was kind of Sylvanas out entirely. I do own it, and I will read it. It is on my list. It just is not very high on my list, because I wanted a break from that boss, and since that boss came back for season 4, I'm like, oh god, this is happening again. Can I just get a break from this boss?
Put that on the shelf for a while if you need to distance yourself from Sylvanas.
Yeah.
The raid boss in order to read the book. Yeah, it might be a while.
Yeah.
It was really good, though. I will say that. It was a very nice bookend to Christie's Arthas novel.
All right.
So it was. I was not really hyped for it myself, but it was a really good read. So.
Yeah. But
for whatever that's worth. When you're emotionally ready,
thank you.
It'll be there for you.
Excellent, thank you. I am looking forward to it. I do enjoy all the books. It's just I needed a break. I needed more of a break than I was getting. Anyway, so typically because we get a book that covers that gap when we're not getting a book between this expansion and next one, since we got the Sylvanas book, Steve actually put out a post that says, "Hello, friends. I wanted to take a moment to address the topic of time passage between Shadowlands and Dragonflight. There has always been some amount of time passing between expansions, though rarely has it been called out in-game. We maintain an internal timeline of what year each expansion begins." Well, so I'm curious about that now. Like, come on, Steve, give us what year things are happening at. I'm now genuinely curious about some of this stuff.
Read on and for details.
Exactly. And the gap between them has either been 1 year, as with earlier expansions, or 2 years, as with most of the later ones. But NPCs in the world don't talk about how the Burning Crusade took place in the year 26 after the Dark Portal opened, or how we rediscovered Pandaria in the year 30. Well, so now this is a little bit interesting because they're using single-digit years. And I kind of expected 4-digit years. I'm just going to put that out there. It's a little weird.
Well, it's all from the Dark Portal opening. That's how the whole timeline is built, which makes sense. I think that's an easy thing for us to sort of, mentally sort of center ourselves on.
So there'd be before DP and after DP. It's ADP. This is ADP.
Yeah,
26 ADP.
Yeah,
fair. Okay. When you look back at the Warcraft timeline, one of the things you'll notice is that a lot of massive world-changing events are tightly clustered together. This is especially true for World of Warcraft, since launch has had a multitude of invasions and catastrophes back-to-back in chronology. Yeah, it's really an unfortunate place to live. I'm just putting it out there. There's crisis after crisis after crisis after...
It's been a rough couple of decades in old Azeroth.
Yeah. With Shadowlands representing the closing of one book in the Warcraft saga, as we mentioned in interviews around the release of Eternity's End update, I feel like an opportunity to give Azeroth and its inhabitants a bit of breathing room before Dragonflight ushers in the start of the next major storyline. Shadowlands began in year 35 after the Dark Portal opened, so ADP, and Dragonflight will begin in year 40 ADP. So there's going to be 5 years of time that passed, where typically we saw 1 to 2, just making that clear, typically we saw 1 to 2, now we're seeing 5 years pass between Shadowlands and Dragonflight. Given the events of Shadowlands took place over the course of 2 years, that leaves a few additional years that we are fast-forwarding through. Oh, okay, so they're actually saying 5 years after, as in it's 3 years
There's
after.
a 3-year gap between the end of between the end of Shadowlands and the beginning of Dragonflight.
Fair.
Right? So
fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Our purpose here is not to have any litany of events that take place outside of the game that you'll need to read about in a novel or other media to understand the state of the world. The goal of the Fast Forward is to provide the people of Azeroth with a slice of normal life without a major threat looming over their heads. When our heroes return from the realm of death, man, I mean, from Shadowlands just sounds so much better than the realm of death. My goodness, that's very dramatic. You can imagine them easing back into their lives and duties without an immediate crisis to address or enemy to fight. I'm just going to say there's going to be a lot of PTSD for people returning back from fighting over in Shadowlands.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be able to slip back into my regular life very easily there. Whew.
No, yeah. I mean, it's kind of an interesting framing for all of this, though. It's not really Shadowlands must have been a weird one to tackle narratively, and I don't really know how they ever thought you know what, this is what we should do next. But I guess it just felt like really that the helm of domination and Sylvanas and the Lich King and everything needed to be dealt with once and for all. But yeah, because it's such a weird left turn for the story to go in, and then how do you reset back to kind of more traditional plot lines and stuff? And so this is all part of it, I guess.
Yeah. So with the Alliance and Horde honoring the truce signed after the Fourth War, the average Azerothian citizen will be able to enjoy a time of stability and reflection, and lots of therapy. That said, we plan to offer that therapy thing wasn't in there. That said, we plan to offer a digital story, short story on our website that details one particular joyous occasion which has been referenced in the alpha build. It's going to be a fun and charming read, but it won't be necessary in order to understand the events before Dragonflight. Besides stretching out the WoW timeline a bit, another benefit of this fast forward is that it will let our younger characters get a little older, allowing some of them to take a larger role in future storylines. Yet not so much time will be passing that you'd expect characters who are already adults to look significantly different. Who knows? Someone could put on a lot of weight. I'd get back from fighting at Shadowlands and just be living life up, Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you had Anduin get a little bit pudgier, a little bit bigger. He's sort of enjoying himself a bit more, a little stressed out.
Yeah. It's I don't know about. I'm not holding up too well myself over the last 5 years.
Exactly,
so,
right?
I don't know about all this, but it's sort of like that. It's that like comic book style kind of stretchy time, right?
Yeah.
Like time can move kind of faster for one character than another, sort of, because it doesn't really exist, but it helps, this way you can, there's like a fast forward, there's a bit of a jump, and it's like, okay, well, maybe a character like, I don't know, Talia Fordragon or something, right? Who we know is like a young adult maybe, or like I don't know exactly how old she's supposed to be, a young adult, an old teenager or something like that. Somebody like that might be an example of a character who, so you see the effects of the fast forward a bit more with her because she's moving into a different phase of her life versus somebody like Gen Greymane, who's already, one of the older characters in the story, and also has like unnaturally extended life because of the Worgen curse and all that. Like, I don't think Gen's going to be looking too much different, but the kids are going to grow up a little bit faster.
Yeah, well, and I would imagine there'd be a lot of, inside her case, there'd be a lot of opportunities for relationships and other things to have taken place. Like, that is a very pivotal time in someone's life for exploring more outside of just work. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, especially after like her meeting up and having chats with family that she hasn't talked to in forever. So we'll see how all this plays out.
Yeah.
All right. Where's it at here? As for changes to the world that have been discussed or foreshadowed, such as the resettlement of Gilneas. Oh, 1 second here. Something in my throat. Such as the resettlement of Gilneas, those will not be happening during the fast forward. As cool as it is to show locations and populations evolving because of the story progression, we want events of this importance to be in-game questions that our players experience for themselves, as with the reclaiming of the Ruins of Lordaeron in the 9.2.5 update, rather than having it happen off-camera. So they're really emphasizing that the time is passing, but they want the critical events or even interesting events that took place during that time passing to be something players experience or learn about through the game. And that the story that they're putting out is just a funsies story that gives an example of something fun that happened and sort of explains one thing fun that happened. And this isn't critical, pivotal information that if you don't have, you're going to be missing out on something. I feel like there's just like this huge caveat that they're constantly pushing forward in this post.
Yeah. Which is good, because otherwise you don't want to end up with another Cataclysm, right? Like, there was so much publishing in novel form and in other formats like around the Cataclysm story that didn't make sense in the context of the game, but it was really the story of Cataclysm, and it's actually very good if you go back and read it all.
It's a great book.
But like that stuff doesn't. They published like 3 or 4 novels in that Cataclysm era, and. Yeah, that whole story was really good, but it was all framed in this media that really wasn't inside the game, and there's been way more of a push to get that stuff as like an interactive part of the experience.
Yeah, I would even emphasize the Legion book that came out about Illidan was phenomenal and explained so much more about his character and made you care so much more about his character than what was published in game. And it was really unfortunate for people who didn't read that Illidan book. It gave you a very different perspective on what was happening in that expansion. So like there's definitely good things about doing, like outside of game publishing, and there's certain things that a novel can do that a video game can't do, for example. But I think when you're talking about something like World of Warcraft, you want to have these big kind of touchstone moments be things that players can experience and interact with, right? Maybe cooperate in together and do them and stuff like that versus here's the stuff in the game like references the actual story, which is in this book or on this website or what, like
Yeah, we don't, they've been a lot better with that over the years, but Steve is just making it like crystal clear here. Like there is not some mystery that you're not going to experience in the game that happens in the fast forward. Like the fast forward was about kind of trying to figure out what does normal even look like on Azeroth now. And, who knows? It could be an opportunity for them to present other types of storytelling that take place in that window down the road in the game or out of the game. But, it's not like, Karen Bloodhoof got assassinated in a book, right? Like something like that.
Yeah, it'd be certainly very weird if they just like took out a character and you just or even vanished a character. Like, oh, so and so went off on an adventure doing whatever it is with this other faction, and you just have no idea. They just aren't present. There's no reference to it at all, and they just come back later on being like, I've been gone for 4 weeks doing such and such. You're like, wait, what? Where have you been? What is going on? That is, yeah, I'd much rather they preface a lot of that stuff. Okay, so for your player characters, it is always been left to your own interpretation of how much time has passed when they log in after the arrival of a major update or a new expansion. Dragonflight is no exception. You are free to imagine what your characters have been doing in that time of respite as you look forward to the arrival of Dragonflight pre-patch. Hopefully this post helps clear up some confusion about the timeline and explain our goals for having a few years pass more than we normally would. I think it's important to also preface that, hey, if you're someone who does role-playing when it comes to World of Warcraft, which a lot of players do, and I think is a fantastic area or game in general for doing that, that you can do whatever you want with your characters inside that time that passes. You could have been off adventuring, you could have been at home, hanging out with friends and family, you could have been doing whatever you wanted to do. Maybe your character was knocked out into a coma at the end of Shadowlands and woke up 5 years later and is all like, what happened? What is going on with all these new things? You can role play whatever you want when it comes to that sort of stuff. So overall, I think it's a great post from Steve. I think the fact that we aren't getting a book or outside explanation of what happened between expansions is something that's unique, a little bit more so with this expansion than previous ones. I like that we're getting a short story. I'll be interested in reading that. I'm sure it won't involve Sylvanas. I hope it's not just Sylvanas did this inside the off time. That's not a joyous story for me. I'm not going to read that. But if it doesn't, then yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this and figuring out what's going on with it, and maybe we can hop into Dragonflight with some more interesting things taking place. I like the concept of giving people a break. That's what I like.
Yeah, it's like a fresh start, right? It's like a clean slate for the beginning of this new expansion. And the expansion, obviously, there's like heavy themes, just even in the marketing of like kind of renewal, rebirth, like rediscovery, that kind of thing. And obviously the dragons kind of play into that heavily since they are sort of the guardians of these primordial forces of Azeroth. So it all kind of fits together. So yeah, I mean, I think it was great to see Steve come out and write this post and get it out there, because obviously, like, alpha is out there. We can play it. You see stuff in alpha. There's stuff that's data mined as well. People can see what happens in the alpha without playing it even. And there's a lot of references to this, span of time in between the events of Shadowlands and Dragonflight. And there's a lot of speculation and stuff. And I think it's, once players start discovering this, because it's the materials in the public test phase, I think it was a good call to have Steve just come out and say, hey, this is sort of the idea. This is the journey that we're taking. And this is kind of, why we decided it would be the way that we wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I think it does set, it's a nice clean table setting for Dragonflight, and to kind of maybe recapture some of that stuff about, like the early days of WoW, when you did sort of have that sense of more kind of grand exploration and everything. And I think that's a big thing that they're trying to establish with Dragonflight. And so not having these big interconnected, pieces that keep locking into each other, I think that helps a lot. That's a thing I really haven't liked about the game in recent years is the sort of soap opera nature of the storyline, where it's like you sort of have this cliffhanger that feeds into the next patch or the next expansion, and there's these threads that last for years at a time. I liked the storytelling in WoW better when it was less narrative heavy and more just kind of these vignettes, Yeah. And I don't know if they're totally going back to that. I'd imagine if with wrapping up a lot of the stuff that was on the table for Shadowlands, that we'll probably see some new stuff being seeded, and it might take longer for that stuff to flesh out into these years-long storylines. But I think all this stuff sounds cool to me. I like that they're going in this direction, and that Steve was willing to give us sort of a look at their internal timeline and how they sort of categorize it and how long they think it's been since the Dark Portal. This also means that like Thrall and I are about the same age, I guess. I don't know if orcs have the same lifespan as Earth humans or anything, but that kind of puts it in perspective for me a little bit. So that's kind of neat. So I loved it. It was great to hear from Steve in this context, and I'm glad that they're willing to talk about this stuff. This seems like the kind of thing where saying, oh yeah, this expansion takes place in 40 years after the Dark Portal, and we have this kind of timeline in mind, and this is what the plan is, and this is what we want to do. I can't imagine them doing stuff like that like 5-10 years ago, so it's nice to see it and just have that conversation with people, kind of set expectations too. Like I think that goes a long way with WoW players. So really cool post.
Yeah, I there's a lot of things I love about this post and getting this information. I in general, I think the nicest thing about taking a 3-year gap is a lot of these major characters, Thrall, Anduin, Jaina, Tyrande, need a lot of time to process what happened in this expansion. And to not initially be like, okay, we just, or we're still in Shadowlands and Shadowlands is wrapping up. Oh, hey, dragons are back. What's going on with dragon aspects? Let's run over there, while you're still like, yeah, I'm still reeling from the events that have just taken place. Is rough. Whereas I think giving all of those major characters time to digest what happened, process it, put some time into, reflecting on those sorts of things, and sort of be in a different place. And now, years later, be in a different place mentally and emotionally about it, I think is great. So I'm excited that we're not going to be dealing with super traumatized, potentially still super traumatized characters as a new event unfolds.
Yeah, especially a character like Anduin, right, who really was put through the ringer, really the last 2 expansions,
also
and
Tyrande,
especially in Shadowlands. Yeah, Tyrande as well.
Yeah,
like I think it's a bit mitigated for Tyrande because she's, tens of thousands of years old or whatever,
right.
and Anduin is like a young, a young human adult. But yeah, I mean these characters have suffered all kinds of unimaginable loss and suffering and everything like that, and there's sort of been this conversation over the years, like, well, isn't it kind of funny how like it's just this one, crisis after another, and it's like, well, what else would they make the game about?
Yeah,
right. Like you got to do stuff in the game. It's not a farming simulator, it's not Harvest Moon or something. I mean, I would play a Harvest Moon clone set at Azeroth for sure, but that's not World of Warcraft, right?
Pandaria.
Yeah, like we need to like do stuff in WoW, and so you need these forces of conflict and everything. So, I think maybe having a narrative go, like we've been away for a little bit, but you didn't really miss much. That's kind of a cool device. I think it's a way to, it's a way to frame this that is like, yeah, we dip in here and go do this stuff when there are problems, right?
Yeah. Okay. Next article that we want to chat about is about Shadowlands going free. Basically, not free to play, just free to get. What happens in previous expansions is when the new expansion comes out, this has happened for a number of expansions now, all the previous expansions are free. Basically, if you buy the new expansion and you've never played World of Warcraft before, or you haven't played World of Warcraft in years and you might not own a couple of expansions, you just get those as a free thing. So the change this time around is before Dragonflight even comes out, you can get Shadowlands for free. So if you're someone who hasn't played since Cataclysm and you're like, hey, I want to hop back into World of Warcraft, you simply open up your BNet launcher, and it's actually a gift instead of that little gift icon on the top. Click on that and you claim your free Shadowlands, which gets you everything up to Shadowlands. It also gets you a free level 50 character boost, and you can just hop right in and start playing the game. This is available for a limited time, I believe. I think it's only available.
Yeah, September 5th. I think 5th? Yes, it's available now through September 5th.
Yeah. Yep. So it's available for the next 2 weeks. If you're someone who wants to do that, obviously a couple months after that, we will then have actually Dragonflight launch. And if you buy Dragonflight, you'll obviously get Shadowlands and everything else included in that purchase because that's what they've been doing for years now. But yeah, I think this is great. This is a great way to promote it even more so. I would have probably run it longer. I probably would have run it till October, but that's just me.
Yeah.
I think it's great for players who want to sort of hop back into the game or who have never played the game before and are interested to just sort of get going. I would also say it's a really weird time. I've been actively discouraging players who've been like, hey, is now a good time for Season 4 to hop back into World of Warcraft? To do that, I think it's a terrible time to jump into World of Warcraft, and this is why.
I kind of do too.
This is why. Because there's so many systems and things to learn about Shadowlands that by the time you've wrapped your head around what's happening in Shadowlands, Dragonflight will be coming out, which revolutionizes all of those systems again. And you have to completely relearn everything.
Yeah, nothing you learn between now and 10.0 will matter.
Exactly. So it's one of those cases of like, hey, if you get into World of Warcraft right now, it's actually very difficult to get up to speed on everything. And if you are up to speed on everything, it's then just going to get reset all over again by the time you actually get there. So as cool as this is, and if people want to claim it, great, definitely do it. You get a free character boost out of it at least, which is fantastic. I think that's great.
It's nice. You just play the current expansion.
But I do wish something like this got uncoupled sooner, I guess. I kind of wish that like they'd done this in Season 3 as a promotional 2-week thing and gotten people in during that. Because then you're at least like, 8 months out or 9 months out from hitting the next expansion, which means people have plenty of time to enjoy this one currently. Whereas this kind of feels like hey, you got a month and a half or 2 months to enjoy it. Hop in there and check it out before it completely resets and you have to learn everything again.
Yeah. I guess the argument there is like Season 3, the new expansion is not even announced yet. You might still be able to sell some Shadowlands licenses, right? Like you're still deep enough in it that maybe. But I mean, this is a cool promotion. But I agree with you that it's a really bad time to start playing World of Warcraft. But if you're really jazzed up for Dragonflight, and if you're listening to the show and you haven't been playing regularly, maybe you haven't played Shadowlands at all, we have had a lot of people dip in lately and say, hey, I'm really excited for Dragonflight and I just found the show. So it could be, there could be some people in the category out there. I do think what might be a cool thing to do would be get your free copy of Shadowlands, get in there and just level tunes up. Just level up to 60 and then just switch to something else and just get an army of 60s ready so you can flex on whatever you want to play in Dragonflight and don't worry about endgame stuff. That could be fun. Like I've done a little bit of that my own self, right? Like I have a bunch of characters that are 60 and useless and just parked and ready. So that's, that could be a cool thing to do. Probably more fulfilling than trying to get up to speed with Shadowlands Endgame for the last 2 months of it.
Yeah. All right. The Great Push and WoW Variety Show. Great Push obviously started this past weekend and was going on. There was lots of people tuning in and watching to some of these key pushing. There was some weird stuff going on with there's the mainstream that you can watch it on either on YouTube or on it's YouTube/Warcraft or Twitch.tv/Warcraft where you can watch the main streams that are taking place. The players themselves who are participating, because this is an exclusive event, can also stream, which I think is really cool. But how they stream that is really up to them, whether they want to stream with their voice comms or they want to stream without that, just music or however it is they want to present it, as well as allowing people to report on their streams. Obviously, the Warcraft channels are allowed to report on all their streams as far as having that privilege, but outside people aren't necessarily always able to. And there were some teams that were very particular about, no, we only want to stream our stuff. We don't anyone restream our stuff, which means there's no commentary and we're going to stream without comms. And some of the major teams did this, which made this a little bit unfortunate for some people who really were cheering for a particular team. So I don't know if any of those teams listen to our podcast, but if they do, we really like hearing your plans and what's going on and what you're doing. So come on, man, some voice comms or at least let someone restream and have a commentary happening. It's a little rough to just watch a totally silent stream of people pushing keys.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the Twitch.tv/Warcraft stream that took place this past weekend. The European ones are coming up. They're the 26th to 28th, and they're going to be going at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, the prize pool's $210,000, and these teams have 5 hours to basically push their highest keystone they can for each of the dungeons. And at the end of the weekend, they're all going to be combined to determine standings. and the brackets and whatnot are going to be unveiled on Raider.io, so you can go over there. YouTube has multiple language options for watching, as well as I think Twitch probably had some as well, but they aren't advertised inside this initial post. So if you like Great Push, it was actually pretty cool to check out. I love seeing some of the strategies. We saw some like Covenant class combinations that you don't normally see. There was like Night Fae, Blood Death Knight pushing keys and things like that where you don't normally see that. So them just sort of figuring out, hey, you know what? These are some of the more secret strats that we do to sort of be able to do higher keys, and we feel this is more efficient than that. And I really like how this kind of opens the box of availability and viability for a lot of classes.
Well, the other thing too is you have stuff, because you have the Season 4 affix where you get to pick a stat and just stack it up to the moon.
Yeah.
That's why you can open up things like Night Fae Blood Decay, because you don't need the haste as much, because you're getting it from the Nathrezim. So
right.
Yeah, really cool. I mean, teams were timing 35s.
Yep.
Like, which is as high as the tournament realm goes. The tournament realm doesn't go higher than 35.
Yep.
So, that was pretty cool to see. Like they're doing extremely high rank keystones in this competition, and it's funny to hear the casters talking about it too, because they're talking about like, well, yeah, they're doing they should be able to 3-chest this lower Kara 26.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just what you had to do. That was the expectation.
Yeah.
If you can't 3-chest a lower Kara 26,
you're not going to get
29.
Wasting
too much. You're wasting too much literal, actual human time.
Yeah.
Because you need to get to that 29 fast, so you can then get your 31 or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, nobody did lower Kara quite that high, but still 29s and 28s. Like, that's just like superhuman dungeon play. So. Really, I like this format so much better. It is a little bit harder to watch because you do have all of these teams all playing at once, and you're kind of jumping back and forth. Teams aren't all doing the same thing; they're in different dungeons. They may be they're starting them at different times, so they may be kind of desynced. They might be in the same dungeon but on the same spot, but they're not racing each other. It's the idea that like the timer would be the tiebreaker is kind of unlikely the way this format works. Like it would have to be. It have to be really down to the wire for the timer to come into play, as long as teams are timing the keys. So, just amazing to see what is possible with like perfect, tournament realm gear and the Season 4 affix and this dungeon pool and just some of the stuff in like Junkyard with the bots and everything. I mean, even the teams that didn't finish in the top 2 were timing 34s and 35s in Junkyard over the weekend. So.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what the global finals, which take place on September 2nd and 4th, or 2nd to 4th, are going to look like as far as coverage goes. Because you're right, like part of the reason why I brought up the topic of some of these teams are streaming, and some of them have comms, don't have comms, some of them allow people to restream and commentate, some of them don't, is it's nice to be able to pick a team you're cheering for and watch them and see how well they're doing, and be able to check in on that. But when you don't have any kind of coverage of that, it can sometimes be hard to keep track of what exactly is going on in the dungeon. Whereas having that analysis is really important. So I'm hoping the global finals, because there'll be fewer teams participating than there are right now, are covered really well and can really focus in on some teams and some strategies those teams are doing. Because otherwise, I feel like a lot of this is just going to be after the fact. You're going to have a lot of people taking a run, analyzing it after the fact, and then doing a YouTube video or something where you can watch it after the fact with them commentating on it, which is just a lot less exciting when it's not live for what's happening with these teams in the competition, especially once you already know who wins. It's a little bit less exciting to see how a team did something than it is when you're watching it live and watch them pull something off that you didn't think was possible or that was crazy. So yeah, I'm hoping that the global finals have really good coverage for that.
Yeah, there's 4 teams in the global finals, right? It's just is it top 3 teams in each region? Because if it's 4, then you could kind of have them all up on the main stream, like in their own windows, pretty easily all the time, which could help with the continuity. But I'm actually not sure how many teams are going to be participating in the finals.
Yeah. All right. WoW Variety Show. It's happening tomorrow, August 24th, on the Warcraft channel on Twitch. And it's going to start at 5 p.m. Pacific time, so that means 8 p.m. Eastern time, which is when I raid. So I will not be able to watch this because I'll be raiding. But they're going to have 3 main activities in their format. There's going to be a leveling competition, or at least some sort of leveling contest, and then a scavenging hunt that can take place, and a race through Azeroth that is going to take place. And they're all going to be played on North American servers. And while we were recording the show, while we were doing this show right now, is when they announced the celebrity lineup. Till now, we had no idea who was doing this. There was no advertising for it, no promotion for it. So we're kind of surprised that they didn't like have a hype leading up to this. But unsurprisingly,
when they announced it, right, they mentioned we're going to have celebrity team captains for all of these activities who will announce later on Twitter. This was like a month ago.
Yeah.
And I figured like, okay, they'll probably like have a week where they announce them all, or they'll do like one a week until they round out the whole roster or whatever. And instead they waited till the day before, which seems like not a great way to hype up the event, but what do I know? I am just a podcaster.
Unsurprisingly at all, Taliesin and Evitel are back as the hosts of this entire thing. They tend to be the go-tos for a lot of these online events. The contestants, though, the celebrity contestants, are Bajheera WoW, who, if you have not checked out on everything from Instagram to TikTok to YouTube to Twitch, creates lots of World of Warcraft content, primarily revolving around PvP. Aya, who is the one of the current hosts for the AWC, as well as has been participating more and more in Blizzard activities, is another one of the contestants, as well as Hazelnutty, who, if you haven't checked out Hazelnutty Games as well, is a Twitch streamer, but also primarily YouTube content creator, who does everything from raid boss guides to pet battle guides, which I really enjoyed. They certainly helped me out over the years when I was doing it, right up to just streaming the game and playing the game and doing some raids. So if you would like watching Hazelnutty, that's also one of the contestants. And then Sloot, friend of the show, back as always, doing some World of Warcraft stuff. He took a break from doing MDI, but it looks like he's back for the variety show, and who knows what that means for future potential activities, but this will be really fun. I don't think they actually listed what particular events they're covering when they're doing this, which is the one thing that I'm curious about.
Well, I wonder, like, how long is this going to last? I assume they're just moving through all 3 events, like, one at a time. I mean,
there's 3 events with 4 contestants. I want to know which are they doing all of them?
Well, yeah, I assume so, because they're each going to have a team. Like the people that registered to participate, however they chose the players that are participating, they're going to split into teams or whatever, and then they're going to do these contests throughout the show. I don't know what the time frame is. Like I didn't see any details about like how long they expect any of this to take or like what the time limit is. But yeah, I mean, this should be wacky. It should be really fun and like kind of a different way to showcase WoW. Of course, we have an obligation to be on Team Sloot for whatever we're pulling for Team Sloot. Whatever happens.
This is true. I have to preface this. All right, I'm pulling for my friend and bruv Sloot. Of course, absolutely. I do feel like Team Hazelnutty has a pretty large advantage in this. She's a very strong knowledge base for World of Warcraft.
Right. And this tests all of that, right?
All
like
a
leveling race, a scavenger hunt. Yeah. The foot race, maybe a little bit less so on that level, but the other stuff for sure. I mean, I think you're probably right. Like Hazel is a strong favorite here, but Sloot's a dark horse, and we always love an underdog around here. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
I got to admit, I'm a little disappointed because I was kind of hoping that, like, when they said there was going to be celebrity contestants, I was kind of hoping that meant people who like are actual celebrities. That,
like people have like Ronda Rousey come in and do something or whatever it is.
I was hoping like Mr. T might be one of the team captains or something. Somebody the kids like Mr. T, for example. But he was in those commercials 15 years ago.
Exactly.
But something like people with like kind of crossover appeal. I'm sure there are like still a handful of like celebrities from outside the video game.
Like Henry Cavill comes in as part of this or something.
Like something like that. Like that's kind of what I was expecting because they framed it as like celebrities. And I'm not trying to denigrate our celebrity contestants, but and they are huge names within the WoW sphere for sure.
Yeah.
But the way it was kind of initially sold, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be like, a media crossover kind of event. Who are they going to get to participate in this? Like, who are the current like stable of like celebrity WoW players, right? And they kind of do this, like, sometimes you see these really kind of, I mean, I hate to, I don't mean to insult anybody's hard work, marketing the game, but like they do those like, WoW partner social media posts with people who are like who are famous but not for gaming. And yeah, you mentioned like, Ronda Rousey was in that like live action spot, like commercial style thing they shot, and like there's other people who are notable outside of the WoW sphere who I thought maybe would be participating, but it became kind of clear to me when nobody was announced in advance that it was going to be people that are like, like dyed in the wool, like WoW personalities, like people that we know from WoW primarily, number one, and which is cool. I mean, I think it's going to be a cool event, and I also raid Wednesday night, so I'll probably watch this on VOD just to check it out and kind of see how it went. But I won't be able to watch live. But it seems like they got a good crew here to have fun with, and it should be a fun broadcast and just showcase some stuff about WoW that isn't like super high level, like hardcore play where like every GCD matters, right? This is just, we're having fun and exploring the game and showcasing it in a different way. I think it's a great idea, and I hope it goes off well and people like it, because it would be a cool thing to see more of.
Yeah. I'm just curious about all these teams' leadership strategies, right? Because like I know how Bajir is going to lead a team with energy and excitement and like pushing. I think is going to be great. I have no idea how necessarily Hazel's going to do, because she can be someone who's a little bit more understanding and sort of, a little bit less forceful in how she plays or explains things, really understanding. Sloot can be either highly competitive or super trolly, and you're like, well, which way is it gonna go, man? Like, I don't know. So, and I only know Aya from doing hosting, but has always seemed like a really nice person who gives everyone sort of their chance to give input. So it's curious. Like, they all could have very different leadership strategies. Like, this is going to be a really interesting thing to check out and watch. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the VOD for sure. All right, with that, we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you! This sounder is for you. If you haven't checked out our Patreon, it's over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. I wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to our newest patrons, Bobby A, Matthew C, and Graham M. Thank you so much for hopping in, supporting the show. It's always great to see several names pop up as newest patrons. That's fantastic. We are entering that phase of Dragonflight where we're doing a bit more of a spend to sort of redo some assets and branding and whatnot for Dragonflight. So it's always great to get support. And we appreciate all the support you all can give us. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Welcome aboard. I mean, yeah, 3 new patrons in a week for an old show, an old Patreon like ours. It's really great. So we appreciate having you, and we appreciate the support. It helps us make the best show that we can possibly make. It really does mean a lot. And it has meant a lot over the course of these many years we've been doing it.
Yeah. Now, our next patron episode is going to be this coming Friday. We'll probably go live at about 8:30, and basically the question for you all this month is, what do you think so far of Fated? Fated has been such an interesting thing, not just affix-wise, difficulty-wise, bringing back the different raids, bringing back the different content for people to check out, having all the different bosses, new mechanics. You can talk about Dinar, you can ask about all those sorts of systems. So I'm really curious about what you all think about having Season 4 and having Fated be a thing this time around. I want to hear people's opinions. Maybe you're not playing a lot of World of Warcraft right now. Maybe you're playing tons of World of Warcraft because you're really enjoying the systems and you enjoy the new dungeon pool and whatever it is. But we want to know what you think of Fated so far now that we've been through a full rotation of the raids and everyone's had a chance to sort of experience it. So we want your opinions. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many. I mean, I have personally had, conversations with people who Season 4 didn't move the needle for them at all. They really kind of checked out and Shadowlands at one point or another, and season 4 wasn't enough to get him back in for one last ride. I've seen people who I play with who've become mega energized by season 4 and are spending a lot more time than they have even at like other points of this expansion, even when it was newer. So just running that whole kind of gamut from like either I don't care about this at all and I just want new stuff to do if I even want that, or I need to do all of the stuff that's in here. There's a lot of elements to it, and there's a lot of different ways to interact with the stuff that season 4 has to offer. So I will be curious to hear what people's experiences are like.
Yeah. All right, folks, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, leave us those 5 stars. They really help out our show, boost us up those charts, help us find more listeners. And we love reading them here, like this one that comes in from, I want to say it's Cheney. Am I wrong on that?
Maybe Shane?
Shane could be Shane, 1025, entitled Number One Source of WoW Info, says, "Hey guys, first off, I want to start off by saying thank you for putting together an awesome show every week. I listen to it every Tuesday while I'm at work, and it's where I learn the most about things going on, not just in WoW, but Blizzard as a whole, along with great tips for Mythic Plus and Raid. I greatly appreciate you guys saving me from those boring WoWhead articles. This is an awesome podcast and great tool for new players, old players, returning players, or people just thinking about the game. I recommend it to anyone I can. I recommend it to anyone I can, and will continue to do so." Well, thank you so much for that. "Keep being awesome. Vedas, your friendly neighborhood tank." Oh, well, Jason, you have a co-tank here who's leaving us those big old 5 stars. Thank you so much, Vedas. This is great.
Yeah.
I love hearing that we make your workday go by smoother. I love hearing that you recommend it to others. I'm always surprised when I bump into people who know about our show, even though it is the largest World of Warcraft podcast out there. I still enjoy the surprise that happens when I bump into someone chatting with them and they've heard of it before. So that's great.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to write in and to say hi. Glad you're liking the show, and thank you so much for the word of mouth as well. That means a lot. Like if somebody if a friend, somebody you trust or like you respect their opinion, says, "Hey, check this out," then like you're probably going to do it, and that's a way that we find a lot of new listeners and more people to join the conversations that we're having and all of that stuff is because somebody likes it and goes, "Hey, you like WoW? You should check this out." Like that goes a long way towards growing the show and growing our community. So thank you.
Yeah, apparently we should also invest in advertising to postal workers because apparently we fit very well in their niche market.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we have. It's coming together. Yeah, I don't want to put any pressure on our postal workers, regarding doing like an LFR or something before season 4 is over, but the wheels are turning. And more of them are finding each other every day in our Discord. So
that's true. Yep. That wraps up episode 537 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show, leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter, or you can join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/Discord. If you're a patron and you're trying to submit your question for our Q&A episode that we have coming up, you can do that through Discord. You can do that through Patreon. And the other big thing is if you want to participate live, you just have to be there inside of our little waiting room channel. We'll get you in. You can get your hands on some TSE gear over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone. And you can check out all the designs from shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of fun stuff. You can also find that link in our show notes, thestartingzone.com. Just head over there, go to our show notes, and has all the links to all the articles and everything we talk about on the show. So feel free to find our source information through that too. Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, always talking whatever I'm getting into around WoW and other stuff. And you can find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sunday nights, 7:30 Eastern, we get it going for Fated Raids and Keystones and whatever else is going on. Mondays, we typically do alpha streams around 7:30, 8 o'clock. Might be beta streams before too much longer. I don't know. And now that we have hopefully a bit of a more stable alpha environment, those streams should be a bit more fun because we're not starting a new character every single week and going through a new chunk of content. So I'm looking forward to getting more into that stuff as we get more continuity in the testing phase. But yeah, you can find me over there.
Cool. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.